Respected Professor and my peers, I'm Amit Joji Malikahyil, and it's my pleasure to present to you my seminar for the course BITS F452 Blockchain Technology. Now, without further ado, allow me to present UniSwap in 20 minutes. UniSwap is a decentralized, permissionless exchange that allows anyone to trade Ethereum ERC20 tokens directly without the use of a middleman using open source blockchain technology. I shall get into what all this means shortly, but for now, these keywords are what one needs to focus on to understand the crux of what Uniswap is. Being a decentralized alternative to traditional exchanges like Kraken or Bitstamp, we must first understand how a traditional exchange works in order to understand what Uniswap does differently. For starters, traditional exchanges are centralized. In other words, they are owned by a company that has complete control over the exchange and the computers that run it. Traditional exchanges are also regulated by KYC or Know Your Customer laws, which require users to submit extensive personal information, including one's home address and tax information. Users also need to deposit money on the exchange, thereby giving the exchange control over their funds. On a traditional exchange, users carry out transactions by submitting a buy or a sell order listing their desired price and token. There are more nuanced inputs like a stop loss, which, as the name suggests, is used to limit loss. But for the purpose of this presentation, we do not need to get into these. All of these transactions and orders are recorded in the exchange's order book. If the exchange is able to match buyers with sellers, the trade is executed. Now that we have an idea about how a traditional exchange operates, we can begin to look at what Uniswap does differently, or in other words, how a decentralized exchange, also known as DEXs, operate. DEXs are part of the decentralized finance ecosystem. Decentralized finance, or DeFi for short, is a term given to traditional financial services such as exchanges, lending services, and insurance, which have been decentralized through the use of blockchain technology. Unlike a traditional exchange, which requires a controlling company and a set of centralized servers to function, a DEX consists of smart contracts deployed on the blockchain. In other words, a set of automated rules executed by independent computers without any central entity controlling it. Since DEXs, as mentioned before, aren't centralized, they cannot be regulated. As such, they are open to everyone and hence permissionless. When using a DEX, we don't need an account, nor do we need to supply personal information through an identification process. Users may trade directly from their own wallets, thereby bypassing the need for deposits and giving users full control over their assets. Key difference between a traditional exchange and a DEX is how transactions are conducted and how price is determined. As mentioned earlier, in a traditional exchange, users put forth either buy or sell orders listing the desired price in the exchange's order book. Thus, the liquidity of a traditional exchange is dependent on the abundance of both buy and sell orders at various price levels. Liquidity is the ease of executing a transaction, that is, how easy it is for a buyer and a seller to be matched. If there were only a few buyers or sellers, it would be difficult to match orders, thus making the exchange illiquid. This would be akin to having a shop with no merchandise nor customers. Liquidity is so important for the functioning of an exchange that some exchanges use external services called market makers who are willing to buy and sell at all times. On the other hand, DEXs don't store user funds, nor do they maintain an order book. So how do they supply liquidity? They instead opt to create liquidity using liquidity pools. Understanding liquidity pools is key to understand how a DEX operates, as a DEX, as with any exchange, depends on its liquidity to function efficiently. Liquidity pools are a shared pot of funds deposited by the general public, which are used by DEXs to execute their version of buy and sell orders. Those who deposit funds into the liquidity pool are known as liquidity providers, or LPs for short. LPs receive a part of the DEX's trading fees through a process known as liquidity mining. Now that we have an understanding of how a transaction is carried out, we can move on to understand how the price of the transaction is determined. As mentioned earlier, in a traditional exchange, a trade is executed when a buyer and a seller agree on a price by matching orders on the exchange's order book. This action determines the price of the coin until another trade is executed on the same coin, meaning the price of the coin is the agreed upon price of the most recent transaction. While this model is widely used for financial instruments like stocks and bonds, a decentralized exchange cannot use this, again due to not maintaining an order book. Moreover, users trade within the liquidity pool instead of trading with one another. I shall get into what this means shortly. Instead of using the most recent transaction, a mathematical formula determines the price of the coin. This formula or algorithm is known as the automated market maker, or AMM for short. UniSwap's AMM is called the constant product market maker model. It follows a simple formula of X times Y is equal to K. In other words, when a coin X is traded for a coin Y, the amount of X available in the liquidity pool times the amount of Y available must remain constant at all times. This is better explained using an example. Assume the liquidity pool contains 10 Ether and 10,000 DAI. This would bring our constant K to 100,000, which must be maintained irrespective of how many transactions take place in either Ether or DAI. If we wish to purchase one Ether, we would leave the exchange holding 9 Ether. To maintain the fixed product, the exchange would now need 11,111 DAI. The differential of the two values here, that is 1,111 DAI, is the cost we need to pay to purchase one Ether. The CPMM model maintains liquidity without external market makers, irrespective of how large the order size is or how small the liquidity pool is. It does so by discouraging larger transactions. Let us consider the same example. If we wish to purchase 9 Ether, we would now need to provide 90,000 DAI, meaning the price of one Ether is 10,000 DAI, almost 10 times as much as the 1,111 DAI we needed to pay earlier. Now that we have an understanding of how DEXs function, we can focus on UniSwap more in depth. UniSwap is a DEX built on the Ethereum network infrastructure. It's a set of automated rules for trading ERC20 tokens, which is a term given to a certain standard of Ethereum tokens. UniSwap is also currently the most popular decentralized application, or dApp for short, on the Ethereum platform, and is one of the most forked projects, meaning other developers use its code to build additional applications. UniSwap started out in November of 2018 as UniSwap version 1, which allowed the trading of any ERC20 token to either and back. 2 years later, in May of 2020, UniSwap version 2 was released, which introduced the trading of ERC20 tokens directly. Another year later, in May of 2021, version 3 was released, this time focusing on the capital efficiency of liquidity providers and lowering trading costs. We can take a deeper look at these three to better understand how Uniswap came to be the leading crypto exchange it is today. Uniswap version 1 required users to first convert whatever coin they intended to provide, in this case DAI, for Ether, which was then converted into the coin they decided to purchase, in this case USDC. Before the advent of Uniswap, Ether Delta was the only DEX that had a considerable user base, but it was based on a traditional order book model which does not provide idle decentralization due to lack of liquidity and poor user experience. Here, the trading of assets require proper matching of buy and sell orders between the traders. The order remains unexecuted if the sell order does not match the existing buy orders, affecting the liquidity. Uniswap version 2, as mentioned before, removed the intermediate conversion, greatly improving price slippage, a topic we will get into shortly, and also introduced flash swaps, which simply mean that pair contracts send output tokens to the recipient before enforcing that enough input tokens have been received. Since Ethereum transactions are atomic, we can simply roll back the entire transaction if sufficient tokens haven't been received. These two in tandem greatly improved the time it took to execute transactions on Uniswap. Finally, Uniswap version 3 was focused on the liquidity providers. It introduced several key features that greatly improved the quality of life of an LP. One of these is concentrated liquidity. It allowed LPs to estimate liquidity and build unique price curves based on their preferences. Their capital can now be centralized within custom price ranges, thus enhancing liquidity at those prices. Another feature would be flexible liquidity. It shifts the liquidity from one asset to another if the former goes beyond the LP's price range, at the same time waiting for the price to return to that previous range so as to shift liquidity back to that asset. Removing liquidity from an asset means that LPs no longer earn rewards, and hence they are provided with the option to shift their preferred liquidity to the new price range. Lastly, it introduced flexible fees with a three-tier fee structure depending on what is being traded. Uniswap has also introduced Unitoken, a coin that has gradually made its way to the list of top cryptocurrencies. In September of 2020, about 2 years after it was first released and a couple of months after Uniswap version 2 was released, Uniswap introduced Unitoken through an airdrop, meaning each person who previously used Uniswap received 400 Unitokens for free. The interesting point to note about Unitoken is that despite greatly rising in value since its introduction, it was never meant to act as a currency. Instead, it's actually a governance token that allows holders to influence and vote on development decisions. Similar to shareholders getting voting rights in the stock market, the more tokens one holds, the more voting power they hold. This was done so as to enable the Uniswap team to gradually reduce their involvement and leave management to token holders. The price of Uni represents how valuable investors believe Uni will be in the future and is the price they pay to be part of its governing body. We finish off with a couple concerns that one using Uniswap needs to be aware of. A warning note, if you will. First, we have price slippage, a concept I had previously mentioned while introducing Uniswap version 2. I had mentioned that UniSwap version 2 made great strides in improving price slippage, but by no means does that mean price slippage is no longer a concern. This now leaves us with the question, what is price slippage? Since many people use Uniswap simultaneously, the price shown when you place the order may not be the same as the price when the order is actually carried out. It's crucial for one to cap how much slippage you're willing to tolerate before or canceling your order, as unexpected price movements may happen at any time, as with any financial instrument. The reason for slippage is that every trade on Uniswap is actually an Ethereum transaction, and it can take some time to broadcast your trade and get it confirmed by the Ethereum network. By the time the transaction is confirmed, the price may have already changed. Additionally, as with any investment, it is always susceptible to a certain level of risk. This risk may be high or low depending on the investment, which is the coin or token in this case, but is always present to some degree. The risk an investor may face on Uniswap can be divided into three categories. First being technical risk. This is a risk that smart contracts don't behave as the developers intend for it to. It's often very hard to code completely error-free. So there's always some level of technical risk that exists, irrespective of how hard the developers may try. Second, we have external risk. This is the risk of external information influencing how smart contracts operate to the detriment of other users. For instance, Oracle could provide malicious data, an administrator could change a system parameter, or governance procedures could be co-opted. Finally, we have economic incentive failure risk. Many smart contract systems, especially in the DeFi space, rely on economic incentives to encourage network participants to perform certain actions, as with liquidity providers getting privileges and rewards for providing Uniswap with liquidity that it needs to operate. These incentives could, however, fail to encourage the right behavior or not be adequate enough of leading to other users being adversely impacted. For example, the incentives in the MakerDAO smart contracts could be too aggressive and the DAI to USD peg could break if either price drops too far too quickly. Lastly, due to its decentralized and non-regulated nature, Uniswap boasts a wide variety of ERC20 tokens. This is its greatest strength, as well as one of its weaknesses. This is so non-regulated to the point that anyone can create their own token and list it on Uniswap for free. While this provides a large variety of tokens for its users, it also results in a lot of scam coins. A coin being listed on Uniswap provides no legitimacy or intrinsic value to the coin, while traditional exchanges do extensive due diligence and research on coins they choose to list on their platform. Uniswap, on the other hand, leaves it up to you. It's up to you to do your own due diligence and decide whether a coin is worth investing in or not. With this, I conclude my presentation. I hope I could leave you all with a better understanding of Uniswap, and thank you all for your attention.